Hi, I'm Jeff Dial. Welcome to another edition of Footprints in American History. Today we are asking the question, who was Savannah's waving girl? We're with Elisa and Shane. Shane, do you know who the Savannah waving girl is?
I don't.
Elisa, do you know who the Savannah waving girl is?
I don't.
Tell us.
We're at Keegan's restaurant in Florida. This is Lisa, our server. Lisa, have you ever heard of the Savannah waving girl?
No, I haven't. Could you tell me?
Before we tell you who Savannah's waving girl was, we will look at the town she came from. Savannah is a charming and historic town on the Georgia coast between Charleston, South Carolina, and Jacksonville, Florida. It was established in 1733 by colonists, including General James Oglethorpe. It was the first colonial and state capital of Georgia. For more than a century, Savannah grew peacefully, welcoming settlers from Ireland, France, Greece, and numerous other countries. Much of Savannah's heritage also came from slaves that came from the Caribbean islands as well as Africa. Savannah was also Georgia's first planned city. As it grew, it became more important as a coastal city for trade. Railroads connecting it to interior cities and lands contributed to this growth. Add to this their ports, canals, and numerous cotton warehouses and lumber trade, and Savannah quickly grew in importance as a major southern export center. By the later 1800s, it was obvious that the winding channels and islands were a major factor for ships and vessels arriving from and departing to the Atlantic Ocean. To resolve this issue, many lighthouses and beacons were placed on the islands between the North and South channels to guide ships on the Savannah River into the port. Two of these islands where lighthouses were placed were Cockspur Island and Elba Island. Our story begins in 1868 when Florence was born on nearby Cockspur Island. Her father was Sergeant John Henry Martis, a German immigrant and Union officer assigned to help rebuild and care for Fort Pulaski. In 1886, he died. A year later, Florence's brother George Washington Martis was transferred to the Elba Island Lighthouse to work. He lived in the keeper's house with his mother, Rosanna Cecilia Martis, and Florence. Sadly, they lost Rosanna in 1909, but they remained in the house until 1931 when George retired at age 70. It was during these years that Florence unwittingly gained her worldwide notoriety as the waving girl of Savannah. She would acknowledge every passing ship, whether inbound or ocean-bound, with a white handkerchief by day and a lantern by night from the front porch of the keeper's home. It is thought that during these years that Florence waved to at least 50,000 passing vessels over a period of 44 years. Her final wave came on June 1st, 1931, when she moved to Savannah with George. According to Dorothy Stewart, who did thorough research on Florence, the earliest evidence of the waving girl found came from a February 1923 periodical which showed her holding a hanky and waving toward the river. The caption stated, quote, "The waving girl at Savannah, Georgia will be the first to greet American troops on their arrival February 7th. The waving girl, who is Miss Florence Martis, lives on a tiny island near Savannah, waiting for the return of her lover who sailed away 36 years ago. She still believes he will come back." End quote. Because Miss Stewart stated that her earliest research dated to 1923, stay tuned to the end of this video for a surprise notation that changes all of this. Florence's waving was known to seamen around the world. Seafarers often looked forward to seeing her famous wave. As her fame grew, so did the explanations for why she chose to wave to each passing ship. Many seafarers who did not know her speculated that she had fallen for a sailor who promised to return, but never did. As time passed, this lost lover story grew along with her fame. And the Waving Girl's mystery wasn't limited to people in the maritime industry. Locals in Savannah wondered about their local icon as well. Florence was an enigma to them. Her family were not members of Savannah High Society nor leadership. Very little was known about their past, and for the most part, they kept to themselves. So the mystery grew with people in the local community and with mariners, along with the legend that she was waiting on a lost lover. But the truth is that Florence Martis was never even known to have a beau. And if you were to ask folks who knew her to describe her, you would get a different description from every person. She was ordinary, dignified, quiet, and kind. Others considered her a vibrant redhead with a sense of humor. She was also strong and fearless, feminine yet neat, hospitable and giving, shy and reserved. But there was no denying that Florence was extremely loyal to her brother George, living with him her entire life. And most people did not know that Florence Martis actually hated the lost lover story. People who knew Florence never once considered her eccentric. Florence herself often told people that she began waving out of loneliness. But this can only be partly true. Her loyalty to her brother George suggests that she sincerely cared for the sailors on board the ships who were coming off a long voyage or departing for one. Obviously, her time around lighthouses exposed her to stories of dangers on the Atlantic and deep seas. And this loyalty and compassion did not go unnoticed. In 1915, the Merchants and Miners Transportation Company awarded Florence the Silver Tea Service. Clearly, a lot of this could be attributed to her brother George's work. He had twice rescued sailors from imminent danger. Once during a hurricane, the other time when a dredge caught fire on the Savannah River. In 1938, 3,000 people came to her 70th birthday party thrown by the Propeller Club. 5 years later, a Liberty cargo ship was named in her honor. Her notoriety often led to locals going to the river to watch her wave. And this fame did not go unnoticed in Hollywood. Captain Frank Spencer, a family friend who was a historian of Savannah's port and kept a file on her for 30 years after she retired, acted as an agent for the family when Stacy Keach from Universal Studios wanted to do a short film about Florence. The idea was shot down when her nephew, Father Thomas Brennan, got involved and objected on the grounds that the lost lover story would possibly be exploited, even though Florence and her family repeatedly denied its veracity. Even Captain Spencer often publicly stated that there was no truth to the lost lover legend. Another person who became involved in the promotion of Savannah's Waving Girl was Frank Rossiter of the Savannah Morning News, who along with Ann Comer Lane began a movement in the 1960s to memorialize her. It began when Rossiter wondered aloud in a column why nobody had ever considered creating a memorial to remember her. This question grew stronger when Mrs. Lane mentioned that she heard the Waving Girl story when she was on a cruise from a Norwegian ship captain. After much debate and discussion, the decision was made to contract the famous Viennese American sculptor Felix de Weldon to create the statue. De Weldon had done many other notable works, including the famous Iwo Jima sculpture in Washington. It was decided that the statue would be bronze and 9 feet tall. Once again, debates ensued about how the statue would look and where to place it. It was originally decided to be placed in Washington Square, but as time passed, the argument that placing there would be lost on passers-by when the spirit of the effort would reflect by placing her near the famous Riverwalk. When the statue was finally completed, Savannahans were denied the chance to display their prized sculpture. A longshoreman strike in the United States and Italy delayed shipping the statue for 2 years. Finally, on February 5, 1972, the statue of Savannah's Waving Girl was dedicated for ships to see once more. Finally, While there were reports that the lost lover reports often amused and other times annoyed Florence Martis, she once responded, quote, "I was young and it was sort of lonely on the island for a girl, and I started to wave at ships which passed. They would return the greeting and sometimes salute, and gradually they came to watch for my friendly wave from the shore." End quote.